Hey, everybody.
Jesse, you apparently have the video disabled.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
I get an indicator that my video is disabled by the host.
Yeah, mine did initially, and now it's okay.
I can see you. Can't see us.
So, guys,
Yeah, it looks like there's a meeting setting somewhere. Bella, if you can allow us to start video.
Yeah, I'm looking for it. Oh, I think it's right here. Should be good now.
he's not.
Yep, looks good. Thanks, Bella. And Jesse, you're breaking up a little bit on the audio. And video.
Okay, sorry. I was just saying, who came in? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So if you guys can hear me okay now, I keep getting kicked off of this place's internet where I am, but we don't have a quorum, we don't think. I was wondering how you guys feel about meeting after work hours. Kip needs to be able to do that for his job, and I'm fine with it. So, Jean, what are your thoughts? I can't
I'm
hear
fine with
Jean.
that. I thought part of it was getting the staff could just do the taping and zooming and whatever during their work hour time. I thought that's the reason we stuck
Okay,
with 3
so
o'clock.
okay, we'll check with them on that. What about Jessica? You're on here. Do you want to comment?
Yeah, actually, that would be better for me as well. And then just
Okay.
I will be off video today because I'm on spotty internet
Okay.
as well.
Okay, yeah, I may end up being on no video. We'll see. And then Corey, what about you? Does after hours work?
After hours works for me. It's just I would be more concerned with like anybody who has presentations that they're doing. That would be my only concern.
Okay. Who else is in here? I think that might be it. So staff wise, how would you feel about that, Bella and Ben? Like a Tuesday from 6 to 8 p.m. or Tuesday from 5 to 7 p.m.?
Tuesday is like the only day that I'm going to have to really think hard about being able to do. But, well, I guess all weekdays are pretty challenging for me, truthfully. But it's something that we will just have to look at and propose some times, I think, that work for staff. And especially if we move back to in-person meetings, availability of the meeting rooms. That, for example, Tuesdays, like our normal meeting day is not available after hours because of planning board. And so we'll just have to look at that a little bit closer. But we don't have to do things during work hours. I think it's just easier for everyone to give presentations and to commit at the staff level, but we want good attendance and participation from the board. So, and there are certainly other boards that meet after hours.
And then remember Ryan Bundy asked for that back when he had to make that change because of the hours. He loved being on the board, but his work schedule wouldn't fit in with it. So it's now the second person who said it. And I feel like if there's consensus, I told them that if the staff were able to give us some dates and we could work on the logistics of that, then it suits me fine. So anyone else? Oh, Corey, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
I'm just, like I said, in our bylaws, we have it written so that even if there's not a quorum, presentations can still go forward. I only see one action item on the agenda. I mean, is that something that we absolutely must have dealt with today, or what's the story? I'm wondering, are we talking about moving the meeting to later tonight? Or are we talking about completely changing our time?
No, I would say.
We
Like a complete reschedule based on, the staff giving us some times and us just completely converting, because Kip basically said because of his work obligations, he's going to either have to resign from the board or we need to change the time. And so I would also I don't know how we start the process, but Christopher Pesky and Chris Surgener I've not seen them in months. And so it makes it very difficult to have a quorum if two of the members of the board haven't been here in months. So it sets us up to make staff, to have the staff work really hard to get things ready, and then we don't have a quorum. And so I would like to start whatever the process is of saying, the expectation is you attend the monthly meetings. I don't know I think it's 4 that they're allowed to miss a year, and they've both got to be really close to that number. And then have an engaged board and, that we can draw from, so the quorum isn't so tight, because if 2 people are always gone, then the board, only has to have one person on vacation obligation, and then we don't have a quorum. And so I find it frustrating in that way. So maybe Ben, you could talk about what the options are for that.
I just think you're right. I think the expectation is that you're there and that there are processes to go through for removal. I believe, Corey, you asked for someone's resignation who wasn't attending when Chris Siller wasn't attending. I believe that you reached out to him and said, hey, we really either need you to participate or move aside and let someone else have this opportunity. Is that right?
Yeah, that's one of the things that a chair can do is a chair can't compel a member to resign, but we can ask for the resignation. However, the board itself can compel a member to resign. So my suggestion, Jessica, would be try to reach out to them. With Chris, I had to do it several times, and I kept getting different kinds of responses about, oh, I'm so busy, and until finally he just resigned. So
I think that's a good idea. So
give them.
I will definitely send them the resignations. As far as the presentations, Ben, how do you feel about that? Do you want to move forward with them today? The action item is for the budget, for the budgetary cycle. If we can reschedule this meeting in the next week or two, maybe it would help, or maybe it's something that we have to look at next year. It's not like, I don't think of it as being that, urgent.
Even the action item, even though it has a, there's one action item there's really a second action item, approving last month's minutes, but then there's also the letter that you drafted about the Office of Neighborhoods budget. But even though there aren't specific action items tied to the CIP and TIP presentations, we were going to solicit feedback, and I feel like we veer into action item territory with that. So I'd personally rather not give those presentations without and Aaron, I don't know if you feel strongly the other way, but I think it would make sense if we can get this rescheduled, maybe next week even, that it would certainly be timely and, it would be within the timeline for all of those things to happen. And then we could just forgo the meeting today. We could just make a brief announcement about Higgins and then all get on with our days.
Sounds good.
I would second that for the TIP and CIP presentations. If they're, we talked about those last month. I think if there isn't an ability to have an action, we don't have that much more to say. And I think if there was interest from the board, we have a presentation. We'll be presenting some of that, at least related to the TIP, at TTAC on Thursday. And so that video would be available for informational purposes. So rather than take up everyone's time today, probably makes more sense to postpone, or, to wait to do those until there's an opportunity to take an action by the board.
Sounds great.
Okay, I think that sounds good. How about a Higgins update?
Aaron, do you want to give that?
Yeah, do we want to, I think, I had thought doing some, a bit of a presentation and discussion, but maybe since we don't have a quorum and we can keep it a little less formal and maybe just kind of go through the update of where we're at in the process and what we're doing with the project. And then what's coming up in the sort of near to moderate future on that project. Does that sound good? Or I do have a presentation I could run through quick if you'd want, but I'm not sure that it would benefit without having the whole board here.
Yeah, I think just doing the more informal thing would suit me. I mean, Jessica went to the meeting about the Higgins project, so she might be able to chime in at times, but I think that sounds great.
Yeah, okay. So maybe just by way of brief introduction, kind of the background on this Higgins corridor plan is we've had a number of planning projects recommend looking at the Higgins corridor from Broadway to Brooks and what we could do there to make a more cohesive transportation corridor, and also work on addressing the adjacent land use and sort of business and residential changes that are happening. And so that background is partially through the downtown master plan. We spent a lot of time talking about Higgins and how it fits into the broader transportation infrastructure and some of the existing deficiencies, particularly at the hip strip, that section has a lack of bike lanes. There are issues with vehicle circulation, just that it's not very well suited to being sort of what the downtown master plan called a postcard street. So something that really shines as a transportation corridor and kind of a economic hub for Missoula. And so there were a number of recommendations of potential ways we could go for Higgins in looking at future changes that ranged anything from stay with what we've got all the way to, going to a 2-lane facility with fixed streetcar trolley kind of transit along the corridor. And then in between, you have 3-lane conversions, protected bike lanes, sort of a lot of different I think they presented 3 or 4 different options, but didn't land on any one of them as the recommended design for Higgins that we need to implement. And so, and then in the last year or so, we have the Higgins Bridge going under construction. We have that wide shared use space going in. It's already open on the west side of the bridge, and we've seen, even just with that one side open, we've seen really dramatic change in how people are using the Higgins Bridge, and it's becoming more of a hub for people. It's becoming a public space. Really just has changed the dynamic for Higgins in a lot of ways as you're going into downtown. So all of those things kind of conspiring to say that now is a really good time to just decide on what we want to do with Higgins, and try to get this process moving as quickly as possible so that as federal funding becomes available through the infrastructure bill or transportation reauthorization, that we are ready for that opportunity and have a design in place. And so that's kind of the quick background on how we got here with this project. And so I think we may have given an update in past meetings last month just on the general overview. So we have Kittleson and Associates who are helping us on the project team. They are also bringing in Big Sky PR and DJNA, local firms to help with that. And then Leland Consulting, which is sort of a land use economic development firm to think about how different transportation investments might translate to different types of economic growth and impacts on surrounding businesses or property owners. So really a good broad team that I think brings a ton of expertise, both local and nationally for this project. So there are a number of different phases. We've got 4 phases of the project that we outlined in the schedule. The first of which is, well, there's sort of 2 overlapping. The first 2 phases are kind of overlapping. One is doing background research on existing volumes and traffic patterns, non-motorized traffic crash analysis, sort of all of the background research and technical analysis that will go into helping us evaluate what we do with Higgins and where. While that has been ongoing, we also launched the public outreach portion of this project, which will be ongoing. This sort of phase is going to continue throughout the life of the project. We won't sort of start and stop public engagement. We'll have periods that are more active than others. So over the last 2 weeks, we had our initial kickoff, and many of you were involved in that. Jessica was on the steering committee. We also had a number of stakeholder meetings with businesses and other property owners along the corridor, and then did a bunch of direct outreach at events like Downtown Tonight, Out to Lunch, and the Clark Fork Market. And so throughout all of that engagement, we reached, gosh, probably over 200 people, maybe closer to 300, with lots of great conversations. Some people just stopped by and had a couple of quick questions and then took a fact sheet. Others were, engaged in conversations for 20 or 30 minutes and really asking a lot of questions and providing feedback. And so I think we're all feeling pretty good about this, starting to get the word out and people getting engaged and starting to follow along on the project. So with those two phases are underway, and we're continuing to work on both of them. The next phase is going to be working to take all of that technical analysis and input to develop a couple of alternatives for Higgins. So looking at how could we use the space within the right of way differently to accomplish some of those goals and objectives for the project. And then we'll take those alternatives, go back out to the public. So really hit the public outreach hard again in the fall, like maybe October is sort of what we're shooting for. Get as much feedback as possible on what people like, don't like, or other ideas on how to refine those concepts down into a preferred alternative that we can then hopefully build some momentum behind and get generally the community support for, and then get it adopted and then transition into more of the implementation side of getting it funded and engineering and construction done. So that's kind of background where we're at and the project schedule. We did attach the frequently asked questions or sort of fact sheet about the project that has some good information in terms of what our objectives are for this project, and in terms of creating a street that's safe and accessible to all modes, that helps us enhance the economic vitality of the corridor and broader Missoula, and that really emphasizes the accessibility and safety and thinking about Higgins as a destination as opposed to just a commuter corridor that's moving people through as quickly as possible. I think that's all I really have to say, other than we had that really good outreach, and I think we're hearing really interesting feedback from people in terms of what they would like to see. Most of it is not necessarily surprising in terms of increased bike access and safety along the corridor. We heard that a lot, and maintaining the good pedestrian access and pedestrian space along those businesses, and that parking is still important for the businesses and the people who are traveling to the corridor. But I think we also heard some really interesting thoughts just in terms of what the issues with parking are, in terms of not necessarily just being there's no parking or there is parking, but certain impacts like the high school and commuters parking in the hip strip and walking downtown, creating an issue for businesses because then you don't get the turnover that you need. Some of those really specific kind of details have been really, really helpful. And just hearing those perspectives as we go. And I guess the other piece, just thinking about traffic flow, and there was a lot of discussion about left turns and whether we should keep them, or the left turn prohibition and whether we should keep that left turn prohibition, or do we allow left turns? And if we do, how do we do that? And those comments seem to be sort of all over, maybe leaning towards supporting allowing left turns and having those be protected so that people can access businesses just off of Higgins or parking garages or other services. So, and I guess the only other thing I mentioned is in our initial analysis, it's interesting to look at traffic volumes for Higgins and some of the trends that we've seen, and that traffic is really not increasing on Higgins, and that's true pre and during and post COVID. That we've just seen sort of a steady decline over the last 8 to 10 years or 15 years. So Higgins is not really the vehicular capacity hub that some other streets are, where we see a steady increase in volume. It appears to be fairly consistent in that where we see growth in trips is primarily in biking and walking and transit trips. And so that, I think, is good for us in terms of how we think about what that corridor needs to accomplish, and what we do to look at different modes and their access. So we'll have more details about that when we get our technical analysis memo, but that's sort of our preliminary work that we've done and what we're hearing. Ben, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, that was pretty comprehensive. The only thing I wanted to add was to encourage everybody to go to the Engage Missoula page for the Higgins Avenue corridor plan, and look at the materials. We'll be updating that once there's some, technical documents to share. But for now, there's a map that you can click on and drop pins in for comments. There's an ideas page where you can just upload ideas. You can upload photos if you've seen a street somewhere else that you really like and say, gee, this is what Higgins should look like. You could upload a photo of that, and then people can comment on that. There's a survey to take on there as well. And then you just touched on it a little bit, Aaron, but I want to reiterate that our direct outreach to the businesses has been really, I don't know that we've had lengthy conversations with every business owner, but we've set foot inside every business that fronts Higgins and shared this information with them. And some of them we have had come to separate meetings, and we're learning really neat stuff. For example, the senior center is really excited to share their parking lot as long as it works for their clientele also, and times of day can work. But they're excited to share their parking lot with other entrepreneurs in the neighborhood to have it be more than just an empty lot for, outside of the hours of 3 to 2, or 11 to 2 when they serve lunch every day. They don't need as much parking lot there. And so to hear them excited about that was pretty neat. And hearing how people use alleys or don't use alleys, all of this is just adding little bits of information to the puzzle, and then we're hopefully going to be able to tease out a really, several good ideas that become one great idea once we in the next round of feedback. And I don't know if you talked about timeline on that, Aaron. I didn't hear it, but we expect mid-October to be when we come back with some designs. So my guess is that the November Bike Ped Board meeting will probably do a presentation, a formal presentation to present. Here are the somewhere between 2 and 4 options that we are seriously considering, and then getting feedback on those from the board at that time.
Oh, it sounds amazing. I can't wait to see it. It's super exciting to think about Higgins being reimagined to work for more people. Jessica, I don't know if you're able, but if you want to add anything about your experience on the steering committee that met.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that. I heard a lot of support for bike infrastructure and safety and pedestrian space. And then one thing that I have been meaning to follow up on is the MDT representative came on and said, that's all great, but then we do have this route, a state route that is meant to move traffic. So that's kind of at odds, but Aaron mentioned that, and but maybe it's not moving as much traffic as some people are thinking. And there was a mention of maybe changing that up, and can we reroute traffic? And I feel like in my experience on the board, I have wondered about different things either on Orange or Higgins or Brooks, and kind of come up against this issue. And so I did want to follow up on, I don't know, Ben or Aaron, if we could learn more about that, like as a board, what those obstacles are, and just kind of understanding that a little bit better at some point. And then the other thing that I think is interesting that came up was the kind of this tension between wanting more pedestrian space, but also the chaos of Higgins being an important part of it. And it's interesting to hear you mention alleys, Ben, because I think that that is cool that you have people coming in from different angles and just kind of keeping it alive and new. So I think the Engage Missoula page is great, and definitely check that out and encourage your circles to do that as well.
And I just, one last point that I'll put out there, just in terms of timeline, is that we're hoping to have most of this early round of public engagement in the next, say, 2 weeks. We'll leave these surveys and questions up for the rest of the month, but as we start developing the alternatives, we're hoping to have as much input early as possible. So I think getting the word out and making sure that that input comes in sort of over the next 2 weeks would be the most critical time. And then anything that comes in after that, we will absolutely consider and will help us further refine things, but maybe not as much on the front end of developing those alternatives. So I think that's something to consider for everyone.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. I feel like we'll probably work out through email a time to revisit this meeting in its full agenda. Ben, do you want, as far as leading the charge, since it's after hours, if you want to tell us when this is best for city staff, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, can do. And I guess I see there being two separate conversations. One is, when do we reschedule this meeting for as soon as we can? And then the other is, can we look at a permanent new meeting time for the Bike Ped Board?
I think that's great. Oh, Corey's got his hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering that too. I think we said we changed that stuff up when we do the board calendar. So I guess we should just all kind of knock around ideas of when we think a better time would be. That's all I wanted to really mention about that. So I hope we get figured out soon.
All right. Anybody else have any comments? Okay. Well, we'll get it worked out, and we'll be seeing you again soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, you guys. Appreciate you being here.
Bye-bye.